everybody, and welcome to another hobby cheating video. And this one's going to be slightly unusual in that I'm not going to show you any technique or anything like that. I promise we will return to techniques very soon, but this was an important request that I had been talking about with someone, and I thought that I really wanted to get it out. So, and it's about hobby improvement, okay? And one of the most common things I see repeated online in Facebook groups and responses to posts and all over the place is, I could never paint like that. I could never achieve. Alright, so this is a photo from Micky Jenver that she was kind enough to share with me for this purpose. And Micky is a frequent contributor to our PMP, to our Painters Motivating Painters Google Plus hobby community that is all about and focused 100% on taking the next step in your hobby journey. Okay? And what we have here is a progression over time. Now, left to right is clearly as we move forward in time, right? And I was talking to Micky about this. And so the leftmost elf is something she painted years ago when she just started the hobby. Note the application of base coat colors and the lack of anything else for the most part, right? Like, there's no washes, there's no real variance to the color, right? The skirt is white. The armor is chain. Now, Micky's always clearly had a talent because even this miniature is fairly cleanly painted, right? That is to say, there's not a lot of paint going everywhere onto other things. She's careful, as always. But I don't think any of us would say there's anything impressive about the miniature on the left. And that's no slight to Micky. It just is an early miniature. And when Micky looked at that, she knew that there was some way to get better. Okay, she didn't see that as an endpoint. There's no basing on it. It just is. It's a gaming miniature. It's been painted. It's fine. Then we move over, right? And we can see the evolution of some techniques here, right? She's used a decal on the shield. She's discovered dry brushing, as you can see on the feather, right? We've actually filled in the eyeballs. Not great. He's a little cross-eyed, but that's okay. We've still gone to the trouble to put in some eyeballs. We see a little bit of layering going on, especially in the chest, where I can see a little tonal variation in the blues, right? We've clearly discovered some black washing or some dry brushing or something to do the chainmail. That kind of thing, right? And one of the things Micky mentioned to me is that when she painted the second miniature, she honestly thought to herself, wow, this is great, which is, I've of course been there too, and we'll get to that in a moment. This is great. This is really awesome. I don't know exactly how I'd get better. Right? And that's one of the most common questions is, where do I go from here? Because that can often be a challenge. You have to know what you don't know. And you don't often know what you don't know. So, I think the second elf certainly represents an improvement. I think we can all see that. I think the color placement and color choices are better. The overall composition of the piece is better. There's some basing material laid down. It looks like he's standing in some miniature Fritos, which I think is fun. But, obviously there's still a lot to grow. So then let's go to the miniature number 3, who we can see has been sitting in a slightly dusty place for a little while. The third miniature, and what was interesting about this is, as Micky mentioned, when she painted this, she was like, all right, this is it. This is the best. And she was really proud of what she did here. And this, by the way, as well she should be. Because the third miniature is honestly a pretty great looking miniature, right? We've got a lot of variation in the purples. We've got some smooth blends in places. There's places where it's not, but we've got some smooth blends going on. We look at like you can see part of the scale cloak that's wrapped up around his chest. The scales look very nicely highlighted. That sort of dragon wing that's on his right shoulder looks, has this wonderful shading to it. The face is very expressive. We fixed up the eyes. They're nice and clean. We've got some great shadow colors, stuff like that, right? So at this point, we've reached up to that high tabletop standard, okay? And certainly we've gotten to a great looking miniature. And one of the things that she mentioned is, again, when she reached the third miniature, she was like, I'm not sure where I would go from here, right? But yet, then we look at the fourth miniature, which is amazing and has this beautiful painted freehand upon the cloak and a wonderfully expressive face with lots more color to it. It's got non-metallic metal worked in all these wonderful ways. We've got this beautiful, incredibly smooth blending all over the whole thing. The basing work has now reached just astronomical proportions. She had to kind of crop some of the base, but if you go back to the PMP and look at Micky's base here, it's really fantastic and sets a striking, beautiful scene of this winter sorceress sort of coming here over this frozen waterfall. And I think if you look at those, it's pretty obvious if you just take a moment to look at the color variation and say just the skull that is her belt buckle. Just look at that, right? Versus the tip of bone that's on the back of the right hand sword of the standard bearer. Look at how much more smooth that skull is versus the little chunk of bone off the back of his sword there. Okay, how it captures all the same colors but does so in such a more organic fashion. A bunch of little tiny things, right? But it amounts to this beautiful progression. Now, how did Micky do this? How did she travel this journey? The answer is she just kept painting a lot and talked to other people, right? And got feedback, worked on her techniques, improved her brush control, and certainly Micky is talented. But her talent, whatever innate talent she has, and I've said this many times, and I really, really want to drive this home. In the end, innate talent, that is to say, being artistically gifted or something, matters for about 10%. There are no great, truly great miniature painters in the world who are relying on innate talent alone. None. Zero. I can say that with complete confidence. Okay? They may have had differing levels of innate talent to begin with, but how they got to wherever they are, okay, how they got to their great place, and I think Micky is a great miniature painter, is simply by practice, feedback, working on the same techniques, choosing particular elements of painting, miniature painting, and deliberately practicing those. I recently listened to an episode of a podcast, and there was a person who draws real-life illustrations. And when he took his portfolio to one of his college professor said, and he had been already drawing for years and years, illustrating for years, and when he took his portfolio to one of his college professors, his professor said, "You're pretty good, but your hands are your weak spot. They're pretty bad. You draw hands really poorly." Famously, hands are an unbelievably tough thing to draw. Renaissance painters used to charge extra per hand you wanted to include in the painting. So his response was to do nothing but draw 5 to 10 sets of hands in various levels of detail and sizes a day, every day, for 4 months. And now, in his own words, he's pretty good at hands. Okay? Now, he was a talented artist before he came to there. okay, before he came to that professor. But it was practice that made him great. The only difference between you, wherever you are, and somebody who's really great is a certain amount of dedication of time and targeted practice. A willingness to get better and improve and learn more. That's how you get from the elf on the left to the elf on the right. Okay? You learn one new technique and you practice it. And then it's in your repertoire. And you learn another technique and you practice it. And it's in your repertoire. And the whole time you're doing this, you're also understanding the way your paint works better. You're understanding how to manipulate the paint better. How to control your brush better. Right? How to utilize the various tools of the miniature painter to better effect. Okay? That's what this is. So no matter where you are, no matter which elf you identify with, okay, you have a clear road to the next elf and beyond. Okay? It's just keep at it and talk to people, solicit feedback. Okay? And you will take those next steps in your hobby journey. You will get there. And there's no set amount of time. It takes everybody a different amount of time to take their journey. But that's not important. As I said, we're not aiming at some end destination. It's about taking the next step. So I want to thank Micky for providing this wonderful image, which is, I hope, inspiring to everybody. That Micky, too, who did that piece on the right, which is a wonderful artistic masterpiece, started with a piece on the left. Okay? Now, I want to share my own progression with you as well, because I don't just want to put Micky on the spot. So, just as a proof, as many of you have seen what I paint, this is a fun progression of miniatures that I've painted over time. The person on the left, the knight on the left, was painted in, I'm going to say like 1999. That's probably correct. Somewhere around there. And he was part of my communist Kislev force. And we can see the amazing color choices here of combining red and yellow with green and, turquoise and deeper crimson and light brown. Wonderful choices all around, no doubt. Hilarious. So, that's a pretty bad miniature, okay? And it's one of the earliest ones I could find that I still own. There's a couple that are also similarly gaudy and awful in different ways. There's a whole Empire army of just bad. Just bad. And it's all out there, okay? And what I want to point out is that the next miniature is like 2006 or 7 or, I don't know, somewhere in there. Okay. Shortly after that, that particular Daemonette kit was released. When the new Daemonettes came out, and they were plastic, I picked up a box because I was super excited about the Daemonettes. And I always liked Slaanesh. And when I painted that, I was like, whoa, I have done something amazing. Because I was using dry brushes and washes back and forth for the first time, right? And I was like, oh my god, this is awesome. And in my head, for years, I was very happy with that Daemonette, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with being happy with your work, okay? But what I wasn't doing was really looking at what other people painted, being inspired by other people, getting feedback from other people, okay? And when I started painting more Slaanesh, which was 3 years ago now, 4 years ago now, something like that. Somewhere in that range. When I started painting more Slaanesh, and I started sharing it with people and posting it because of the communities I had joined, I started getting feedback and seeing what other people did. And I felt so inspired because all of a sudden a new world opened up as I realized all the techniques I didn't know. And so I kept practicing. And Kalita is a good example. I probably could have done this almost completely on Kalitas, but I don't have an old enough one to do the whole progression. But that's one of the latter Kalitas I've painted. I've painted her 4 times, if you're curious. And that Kalita I'm very proud of, still. But when I look at her, I certainly don't think she's perfect. I look at her and I only see the flaws, okay? Because I see everything that didn't come out exactly right, or that still doesn't look great. Bandages are just a real pain. The blending on the cloak isn't as smooth as I would want it to be. All these sorts of things. So, every one of these represented some endpoint for me. When I originally, even the first one, when I originally did that model, I was happy with it. And I want to emphasize that because no part of this needs to be you being unhappy or angry with your miniatures. You should never, it's never about that, okay? You should be proud and happy with each step you take, because if it represents any amount of improvement, no matter how small, then celebrate that and feel good about it. That's not mutually exclusive with taking another step after that. Okay? Every little win you have is still worth celebrating. The guy on the far right is a miniature I'm still very happy with. I painted him for a... He's my foot Green Knight for my Stormcast, and he's in my Grailcast thing. He's the Knight Excelsior from Silver Tower. And it was a really, really time-consuming project because every little armor plate was about an hour to 2 hours of blending. So in other words, like the right chest plate is like 2 hours of blending, and so on and so forth. So it's time-consuming. But it was proving to myself that I could do it. And I still love this miniature and enjoy having him. And that's one of the great things about painting, is that I love owning all of these miniatures because they all remind me of the journey that I've taken and remind me that there's still farther to go. Okay? That we're not done with any journey just yet. So, let me summarize, I think, what I'm going for in this video. And I don't know if you think I'm a good painter or if you think Micky's a good painter. And if you don't, if you're not impressed by our best stuff, that's perfectly cool. I understand. I'm not trying to hold this up as any great, like, I'm one of the best. I'm not. Okay. There are so many people who are so much better than me, who make just breathtaking, staggering works of genius in this hobby. And that is inspiring to me, because I know I've still got a while to travel as well. But each one of those people started with some miniature that looks like Mickey's elf or my crappy knight. Every one of them. Okay? And because this isn't an intuition hobby, innate talent only gets you so far. And that so far, by the way, is like at best 10% of your journey. At best. Alright? Because this hobby relies on the use of unusual paints in unusual ways with unusual tools to recreate unusual things, namely a person in a very, very, very tiny scale. And at the same time, you have to learn the different artistic ways you can express that, because there is no one platonic perfection of that. There are all sorts of different styles to how you can do this. The way you discover what yours is by simply, one, doing some deliberate practice. You pick a technique, and you work on it, and you work on it. Like the gentleman who drew hands, it's the same thing for you. You work on your blending on a miniature, or you work on non-metallic metal, or you work on shading your true metallic metals, or you work on, I don't care, faces, eyes. You know, there's 1,000 examples. Your bases, your whatever. Pick a thing. Don't try to do them all at once on every miniature. That's a quick way to burn yourself out. When you do miniatures, even if it's just a big bunch of miniatures for an army, Just pick one small thing and try to do that in a new or different or better way. And push yourself. Okay? Every time, just pick one little silly thing. It can even be tiny. It can be like, I'm really going to try to do some eyes here on these. Perfect. Go that way. So, pick that one thing, deliberately practice on it, and you'll watch it become part of your skill set over time. The next thing is, it just takes time. Don't get discouraged when you see things better than what you feel like you're doing, okay? Be inspired by them and understand that that person got to where they are because they were where you are sometime in the past. And they just kept taking steps. Okay? Keep taking your own steps. In whatever way and at whatever pace is right for you. There is no perfect miniature. There is no perfect way to get better. There is no platonic form to this. There is your own individual journey and the way you want to walk it. All right? So, there you go. That's hobby improvement. I hope this was inspiring to you no matter where you find yourself on your own personal hobby journey. If you're interested in joining us in the PMP, I am going to put the link down below since I referenced it a few times. But as always, keep sharing your miniatures out there. Keep getting feedback. And as always, keep improving. And we'll see you next time.